tuning in to Around the World in 80 Oysters, a live international show that explores oyster culture, cuisine, and appreciation. So I'm Julie Chu. I'm the founder of In a Half Shell, a blog and guide about oyster and oyster appreciation. And still sitting here in Brooklyn, New York. Haven't really gone anywhere exciting for the last many, many months. And I'm back today to explore a great new place, the United Arab Emirates, the UAE, with Ramie Murray, who is the founder and managing director of Dibba Bay Oysters, the Middle East's first edible oyster farm. So I'm really excited to have Ramie here. I'm going to just bring him right on now. Hi.
Hello. Hi.
Thanks for coming on the show.
Not at all.
So before I forget, I always have to tell people, please ask questions using the comment section in either Facebook or YouTube. At the end of the show, we will address them if you have any. But please, it's a good opportunity to ask because I have actually so many questions for you. The oyster farm in the Middle East is kind of a brand new thing. I didn't know that they existed. So I guess before we dive into everything, can you just tell me a little bit about your background, where you're from, why you even decided to start an oyster farm?
Yeah. Why did I decide to start? Who knows? I'm Scottish. But I grew up in Dubai. So my parents were expats, and I moved here with the family. And I've done all sorts of different things. Actually, I've founded various businesses in different sectors. I was originally I had a design company, and then I moved into renewable energy, and then obviously I ended up in aquaculture. So
very cool. That seems very logical.
I know you said this is a short slot, so I don't want to get too. There's obviously a long winding road that brought me here. So yeah, because we founded the company 4 years ago now.
Okay.
So it's and we're the only oyster farm in the Middle East. Also saying that, there's obviously some oyster farms for pearls.
Sure.
But
okay.
For edible oysters, we're the only farm.
So did you notice? When did you notice growing up there that seafood oysters were a thing? Did you like oysters growing up?
Yeah, no, I liked oysters, and there's the UAE actually has one of the highest seafood consumptions per person in the world. So it's there was a lot of seafood growing up, and it's the reason I often get asked how did you get into this? How did this come up? And it's funny because I was actually originally trying to start a lobster farm, a tropical rock lobster farm, and that was purely because I'd seen that it was I really enjoyed lobster growing up here, and you couldn't get it anymore because it had been overfished. And so I was exploring aquaculture for that, and then we just started looking at other similar species and go, what could potentially work here? And then just started trying to think out of the box, just going and looking, not just what people were telling us, but what the actual parameters of the species were telling us. Because if you look up Pacific cupped oysters, which is the species, it's grown all over the world, and the reason it's grown all over the world is because of how hardy it is and the range of conditions that it can survive under. So when you actually look at it, it can actually survive within the temperature range that we have. Okay. So we did it just kind of, to be honest, we weren't expecting much.
An experiment.
It was an experiment. We did a little pilot, and but the incredible thing was we put the baby oysters, the spats, in the ocean, and we checked it a few months later, and they were like this big.
Oh wow!
And then we reached markets. I mean, because we were expecting the sort of rate of growth that you would see in places like France, where it's like 2 or 3 years for an oyster, and then these guys were full size in 6 months. So wow. It was just incredible, and but we didn't understand why at that point in time, and nobody could really tell us, and nobody could understand why they were going so well in these conditions.
Yeah.
But the proof was there, so decided to commercialize it, and we started the farm up in Fujairah soon after that, and we had our first harvest 7 months later. and we've just sort of been building from there.
That's amazing. Well, let's take a look before we get further. I want to do a little geography lesson with everybody. So let me pull up Google Maps. Okay, so we're gonna start. And I type in Dibba.
Or maybe UAE, so we can get the zoom out. It's.
Are you where are you sitting right now? Are you in Dubai or?
I'm in Dubai. Yeah, because the farm is about an hour and a half drive from Dubai. So
I'm. So for everybody, here's where Ramie is.
Yeah.
I actually was in Dubai 10 years ago.
Okay.
Which was a long time. Long time, but it was a kind of a surreal experience.
Yeah. We've the place has changed a lot. It's always moving forward here. It's quite different from 10 years ago.
So Dubai's here. And then where should we go next?
So if you go across to the opposite coast and then up to Dibba. Yeah. So this is right on the border. The main part of Oman is south of the UAE, but there's this enclave at the top here, which is the Musn Dam, which international viewers will probably know the Strait of Hormuz. Always a flashpoint for the tankers going through. So that's just a little bit north of here.
Okay.
But this is the bay here. This is Dibba. And then let's go satellite. Yeah. So this is our base of operations is in that harbor there for now. So just in there.
There we go.
Yeah. So that's just there on the corner.
Cool.
And so that's where we process the oysters because the oysters are so fast growing, they need a lot of attention. So if you have a fast growing oyster and you just leave it for months and months and months, they put all their energy in their shell. So you get these very long, thin, like shallow oysters where they're all shell and no meat. So it's really cool how fast they grow here. But it also means a lot of work. So we have to tumble them and manicure them.
Do you take them out of the water and then move them to your processing and tumble them and then back into the water? Yep,
every day we're doing that.
Every day?
Not every day. It's not the same batch, but because we're not seasonal here because we don't have a heavy winter. So the oyster, we don't have to deal with a breeding season or anything. So our oysters are fine to eat all through the year. So we harvest every week of the year, like throughout, without stop. So we are planting spat every month, and so we've got a constant cycle of oysters coming through.
Wow! And so never ending. So you'll never be able to take a vacation.
Never.
Man. So sorry, I'm trying to find the next place.
Oh, sorry, I wasn't paying attention. So go north.
Okay.
South.
South.
Yeah.
Okay.
Stop. There. So if you zoom in there, and then you see that little white speck. That's our boat. And then you go in a little bit further.
This is so cool that you can see.
And then, so we're doing a long line culture. So we're completely offshore, and so we have 100-meter long lines that are suspended below the surface, and then we have lantern nets hanging off of the lines. So I believe we're
green because I have photos of this.
Yeah. So. In other parts of the world, I mean, they'll maybe do this for parts of the life of the oyster, but we do it for the entire cycle. So we bring spat in when they're a couple of millimeters in size, and we have an upweller system, and we just pump seawater. The wonderful thing about the conditions here is it gets very hot, but there is so much phytoplankton and algae in the water. Almost the entire year. So where you run into problems with hot weather with oysters in other parts of the world is the heat makes the metabolism go very fast.
Yeah.
So they try to grow fast, but if there's not enough food to support that, then they die.
Right.
Whereas here we have the food supply because we're right on the edge of the continental shelf. So we get this nice upwelling from the Indian Ocean. So there's all this nutrients comes through, and so there's enough food to sustain the metabolism of the oysters, which is triggered by the heat. So this is why they grow so fast, and we've got 7-8 months. And we've got nice big fat number 2 oysters, which are sort of 100 grams, 120 gram oysters.
Wow.
And we have a huge meat content as well because they're just full of meat.
Well, here's the photo of the underwater scene where there's this
Yeah.
I only know of one other farm in the U.S. that employs this method. But yeah, it's actually very rare to see this.
Yeah.
In the States. Is it because it is just deep water, and that seems to make the most sense?
We're in quite shallow water,
okay.
but we're just on the edge of the shelf, so it's very deep, not very far away.
Got it. Okay.
So we have the benefits of operating in relatively shallow water, but then having the nutrients from the deep water, and then it's quite protected where we are as well. So there's not a lot of storms, and it's normally quite calm. So it makes it.
What's the water like? The tides or water flow like?
We have wonderful. There's quite strong currents, so we get nice fresh water coming in from the Indian Ocean all the time. So there's really good flow, lots of food. It's pristine because there's just no industry on that coastline. It's very low population, and there's no rivers, which rivers are a problem. Because you can't control what's coming down a river. So when you get these problems in other parts of the world with pollutants coming down or too much fresh water at the same time, it's because of storms coming down these rivers.
Right.
And traditionally, you'll have oyster culture in estuaries because it's just easier because you're protected from storms. Whereas there's more food out in the open ocean, but it's just much harder to operate. So
I see.
Because we've got very calm offshore conditions, and also just technology moves on. We've got we've got a nice new barge with a crane and everything, and we can tend to it on a daily basis. So it makes it possible. Whereas in years gone by, in places like France, you had to be an estuary, you had to use the tide because you had to walk out to get to the oysters when the tide came out, and so there's a lot of sort of ideas that the oysters have to be exposed by the tide, and that's what makes a good oyster. But that's not the case. It's just how people had to do it because that was the only way to do it.
And then you automatically think that that is the only way to do. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So this is an example of your oyster, which you mentioned is a Pacific. Is the Gigas oyster the only one that is you're farming?
Yes. Yeah. So we're purely Gigas, and it's a wonderful species. And there's a reason that I think it's 90% of the world's farmed oysters are this species because they're so adaptable, and they have a wonderful combination.
Where do you get your spat from?
All over, actually. Our only condition is it's a biosecure hatchery. So we've taken from international hatcheries in Europe, in South America, in the UK, and so we take from all over the place because oysters, as I'm sure you know, I mean, it's like wine. Like the grapes take on the terroir. Like it's you can take them, and there will be genetic characteristics.
Yes.
But ultimately, they take everything from their environment, and so we've taken them from different hatcheries around the world, and they end up basically the same because they're because of the food and because of the minerals in the water. Like our oysters are it's not so much in this picture the way the light's falling, but they're very, very white. Like the shell is a very bright white, and that's because of the calcite in the water, because of the limestone cliffs along the sides. And just sort of very interestingly, that's why if you think of Arabia and oysters, you maybe think of pearls, And so Arabia, well, Arabia is famous for very high quality white pearls. So
Okay.
back in the day, Dubai, for example, there were pearl fishermen, and so historically here, that was the economy, pearl fishing, before they discovered oil.
Got it.
Bit of trade, but mainly pearl fishing,
Yep.
pearl diving, and the reason you get such high quality white pearls in this part of the world is because of the calcite levels in the water. So for the same reasons, we get these lovely, bright, vibrant white shells in our oysters, and it's very distinctive. You can tell them a mile away.
Yeah, that's pretty amazing. I didn't know
Mm,
that, but that makes perfect sense.
mm,
Do you find like, well, I now that you said that when you take in spat from different hatcheries from different
mhm,
continents, but yet
mm,
they end up being more or less the same in flavor, texture. What have you?
mhm.
Do you see any kind of visual difference between what the final
Uh,
product is? Not
no,
really.
not
Okay.
really. It's because it's about the shape of the oyster is determined by. I mean, I would say it is the genetics,
Mhm.
but it's primarily how they're handled what affects the
Okay.
shape. And so we handle them a lot. So we manicure the shell and like we tumble them a lot. So we get a very very even deep cup, and so
Right.
we will get that regardless.
Right.
And then the meat content is down to the nutrients in the water and the temperature. So I mean, yes, there are small differences, but I would say overridingly the environment
Got it.
plays the role.
That makes
So.
sense. Now, so tell me a bit more about, I guess, consumer interest in oysters in the UAE
Mm.
at large.
Well, as I said previously, I mean, it's some of the highest consumption of
Right.
seafood per person in the world, and
Is
and
it mostly consumed in restaurants, or do people actually cook seafood at home?
I would say the local population, the local Emiratis, there's a big tradition of home cooking of the local seafood, and they would traditionally not be huge oyster consumers because the
Okay.
local oyster, the traditional local oyster species is the pearl oyster here, and that's not particularly edible.
Hmm.
So the ones we're growing would, but it's initially it was entirely geared at the expat market, the tourist market. Um, but we're now getting a lot of interest from the Emirati local market as well,
Ah,
because there's huge seafood consumption, and everybody's always pleasantly surprised that you have this world class product that's from here,
right.
and is readily available now. So yeah, there's
Very
a
cool.
real growing interest in the local
And
population.
are more of your oysters being consumed within the within the country versus being exported, or do you do any export
Well,
at all?
currently we were just gearing up for exports just before this little hiccup in the global economy, and so we haven't really been exporting. We've had huge amount of interest, and we were looking to export all over the world. So that's we're still planning to do that, and that will come on track probably towards the end of the summer,
Right.
beginning of the winter. So.
That's
But
very cool.
currently, it's totally UAE at the moment.
Totally. Okay.
Mm,
And then I guess do you see oysters being used in other ways
mm.
beyond just being consumed raw?
Well, yes, because there's actually quite a large Chinese population here in Dubai,
Hmm.
um, and so we've actually just recently started selling a lot of our because our oysters grow very big,
Hmm.
and they grow so fast. We actually have a window to sell them at a certain size.
Okay.
So in other parts of the world where they're growing slowly, you're like, okay, we've got these sort of number three. And by the way, I use the French numbering systems.
Sure.
So like,
Yeah.
well, we've got like a certain number of number threes on the farm, and like we basically got a season to sell them. Whereas we've got a month, and then they're number twos. So,
Got it.
so, and then if we don't sell them at that size, then we've got number ones. And then I've got some oysters on the farm that are 2.5 years old that are half a kilo.
Holy cow.
So we have this window to sell them, and then they get bigger. And so we were looking for markets to sell them. And because of the slowdown, because of the lockdown and the COVIDs, we've got all these huge oysters that are sort of piling up. And but then we've just sort of recently really started selling into the Chinese community in Dubai because there's a real tradition of them cooking them.
Sure. Yeah.
And so they want the bigger ones. And so so they're being used for Chinese cooking. They're going down very well.
That's awesome. So in these photos, can you tell me what's going on, like on the left? It looks like
on the left, that's Chef Andreas. He's F&B director for Marriott Group in the UAE.
Cool.
And we have a wonderful partnership with Marriott, and they really got behind us to promote. They were trying to promote their properties because they have 65 hotels in the UAE, and they were trying to promote from a group level using more locally sourced products and being more sustainable. And they came to me because they were like, look, we could just tell everybody that this is what we're doing, but we would rather like promote it, and we want to use Dibba Bay as an example of a world class product that's available locally here. Why aren't you using it? And so we did this whole documentary and a pop-up tour around all the top hotels, like we did it in the Ritz-Carltons and what have you. Yeah. And then this here is actually at the F1, the Abu Dhabi F1. And so the track is just going down the sides here. So that was a wonderful event. And then on the right here is in Carrefour, and this is Christmas time at Carrefour. And so we did a lot of retail, doing a lot more retail now, I can tell you. So the hotel HoReCa business is coming back in Dubai because our lockdown is easing off. But we got a real fright with that, and we were in the supermarkets and we were doing a little bit of online retail. But we'll come out of this stronger because now we have a very strong online presence and we're in all the supermarkets, and it's we're more accessible to people.
Well, so I'm curious, like how it looks like they're being packaged. Like, is there any instruction of how to shuck them? How do people? We don't. We don't have instructions on how to shuck them. There's care instructions. Basically, just you can't really see it here. Just big and bold. Yeah. Don't put them on ice unless you've shucked them. This is just something that always seems to shock a lot of people. There's just and then I just have to point out that they're live animals. Why would you put a live animal directly on ice? And so if you want to promote the shelf life, if you want the oysters to last longer, you don't put them in the coldest part of the fridge covered in ice. You put them in the warmest part of the fridge. And then if you're able to, like for example, in the background here, I've got my shellfish fridge. I have that set at 8 degrees, and I can keep oysters there up to a month because they're not too cold. Right. So it's the packaging there, it's just it's the traditional wood. Well, not traditional. I heard in the US you don't have wooden boxes. You're not allowed to have oysters in wooden boxes. No, we don't have that.
Yeah,
which is a shame because they're so very nicely packaged. I feel like it's a bit more approachable that way.
Yeah. So in Europe, they've always used these kind of poplar boxes, and it works perfectly because I'm actually an industrial designer by training, so I'm very interested in the packaging and how it works. And I explored so many different materials because I thought almost like a new world wine can do what they like with the wine label, as opposed to the old world. I thought, well, I can just rip up the rule book here, do whatever I feel like. And and then I ended up with a traditional French wooden box because It's perfect.
No need to reinvent the wheel in some cases.
Yeah, the wooden box, it acts like a humidor, like a cigar box. It creates a microclimate. It soaks up a bit of moisture.
Yeah.
So if there's any water inside, any moisture inside, it doesn't slosh around, but then it doesn't leak out.
Yeah.
It lets a bit of air in, but it doesn't seal it off. And it just creates this microenvironment and just maintains them. So the only thing we did differently is we've got a window in the top because our oysters are so beautiful. We thought we'll just keep it open so you can see them. Yeah.
Right.
And also because we handle them so much and manicure them so much, they're completely clean. There's no barnacles on them. There's nothing on them. So that they're really quite pretty. So
in these markets, are these the only oysters available, or do you actually see other?
Oh no. There's you have oysters from all over the world here.
In retail.
In retail and in hotels. Yeah.
Wow.
It's you have Scottish oysters, Irish oysters, loads of different French oysters, New Zealand, all over the world. Over the world.
So how have you, like, in the last 4 years, how have you seen sort of your brand or product awareness?
Well, it's really gone up and up and up, and it was obviously a slog at the beginning. There was in all the top hotels here, all the chefs were mainly European, predominantly French. They were not immediately open to listening about a local oyster coming out of warm water and but we just time and time again, when we were doing taste tests, we were coming out on top, just again and again and again, and it just kind of built from there. And ultimately, once you get past these are not supposed to be grown here, and actually just look at it as an oyster and taste it and what have you, we've just gone from strength to strength there. And look, you're eating when you're eating raw seafood, you want it as fresh as possible. So if there's a locally available oyster and the meat content is sort of higher than the highest grade of a French oyster that's been nurtured in an algae pond, then it's just a no-brainer. I mean, it's as I'm sure you're aware with, like, when they put them in these fattening pools in France, and they have the different grades.
Yes.
And there's all these conditions of it's just like the top grade has to be like 1 per square meter for a year or whatever it is. But we're so lucky that the algae levels just in the open ocean are so high in our area that all our oysters have that level of meatiness and fat content. So just straight out of the ocean. So it's
I love that. I had no idea that there was like a unique place that had that condition. I'm dying now to come back and try these when it's possible. We're pretty much out of time. I went over because I'm just so fascinated by this. This has been incredibly interesting.
I did warn you to rein me in.
Sorry, it's my fault. I have one final question that I love to ask everybody is that if you could travel anywhere else in the world to try their local oysters, where would you like to go?
Where would I like to go? I was thinking about this a lot because another species which I would like to try farming here is the Kumamoto oyster, because it's a subspecies of the gigas.
Yeah.
And so it comes from the same part of the world, so I think it would work very well here. And so I would say I would like to go to Japan to sample the Kumamoto, but then also there's a lot of great farming Kumamoto in your part of the world as well.
Yeah, I believe the U.S. actually farms more Kumamotos than Japan does now.
Exactly. So I would love to come across to the U.S. actually, and because you have a great variety, because you've got what, 2 native species?
Yeah, 2 native species, 2 the Pacific, the Japanese,
and the Kumamoto.
And the European flat.
Oh, you're doing the Edulus as well. Okay, yeah. So I mean, I think the US is probably the place to go. Yeah.
Fabulous. It's a lot of ground to cover, but it should be a lot of fun too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Very cool. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us about your farm and seafood culture in the UAE.
You're welcome.
Yeah, I hope you guys do well. Have fun with your new boat toy.
Thank
We'll be
you.
watching
Thank you.
on Instagram.
And
For everybody, if you want to
yeah.
follow Dibba Bay on Instagram. So there's
All
a
right.
lot of cool pictures there.
And export starting soon, so
Yes.
look out.
All right.
All right.
See you
Take
later.
care.
Bye.
Cheers.
Awesome. So that was Ramie Murray from Dibba Bay Oysters. Thank you so much again for tuning in. A couple weeks ago, I told you guys I was taking a break from some of this to focus on other things. And I'm still sort of doing that a little bit, but I'm hoping to bring on another awesome guest for next week. I cannot confirm that just yet. We're still working a little bit of scheduling out. But I will make an announcement on Instagram and to my email subscribers and then on Facebook and whatnot. So if you like this episode, please like, share, subscribe, retweet, I don't know, do whatever. And I will see you soon.